What would you do if a coworker was so determined to get you fired that she kept a secret log of every single mistake you ever made? In today's story, the protagonist discovers this is happening to him and devises a brilliant plan, proving that the best revenge is outsmarting the person who wants you gone. It all started about 6 months after I got a job in a new department. The job itself was great, and I really liked my manager and supervisor. The only problem was my coworker. Let's call her Carol. Carol was particular. She was a neat freak, and you couldn't so much as place a pen on her desk without explicit permission. Don't even think about touching her chair. She had back problems and it was sacred ground. She constantly complained about her workload, slaving away at her desk and whining about how buried she was. When I first started, I'll admit I struggled. I didn't get much training, and it took me a while to find my footing, but I'm a persistent guy, and eventually, I got the hang of things and became quite proficient at my job. This, apparently, was not something Carol approved of. She decided she didn't like me and began picking fights over the most ridiculous things. And I mean truly stupid stuff. If I was in the middle of a task and she needed something, she wouldn't wait for me to finish. She would just start yelling at me to do her task immediately. One time, I asked her what time she wanted to go to lunch. This simple question triggered a full-blown scream fest, as she shrieked at me for not magically knowing her schedule and for bothering her at her sacred desk. It got so bad that our manager had to call us both into a meeting. He told us we needed to figure out how to work together, or he would be forced to make changes. Things calmed down for a little while, but soon enough, she was right back to her old ways. Then I discovered her secret weapon. I realized she was keeping a detailed log of every single mistake I had ever made. It was unreal. Put a box on the wrong shelf? It went in the log. Accidentally leave a power supply unplugged? In the log. She thought she was building a case against me, meticulously documenting my every flaw. She was completely unaware that she was actually just creating a record of her own obsessive, unprofessional harassment. The campaign against me escalated. We work in a warehouse, so my clothes aren't always pristine, but she actually complained to my manager that my clothes weren't clean enough for work. That led to an incredibly embarrassing conversation with my manager about my laundry habits. I'd had enough. I started to fight back, not by stooping to her level, but by using the proper channels. Every time she blew up at me, I went straight to my supervisor and reported that her behavior wasn't acceptable. I argued that we were supposed to be a team, and screaming at your colleagues was completely out of line. To their credit, management agreed, and she had several discussions about her attitude. The Cold War dragged on. Management genuinely tried to fix things. They sent us both to a conflict resolution course and even had our conflict styles analyzed. But they ultimately came to the same conclusion I had. Carol just didn't like me and wanted me gone. Plain and simple. The situation finally came to a head after a massive blow-up. She decided it was time to break out her big guns, the log of my sins. She marched into our manager's office and presented her meticulously kept file as proof of my incompetence. It backfired spectacularly. The manager looked at her, completely unimpressed, and informed her that keeping a mistakes log on a colleague is not considered a productive part of teamwork. She was stunned. After that, I finally managed to have a direct discussion with her. I stood my ground and told her that I wasn't difficult to work with and was happy to help, but I needed her to be reasonable. Management backed me up and gave us some suggestions for interacting, which she actually tried to follow for a couple of months. Then, things took a personal turn. My wife called me one day with some difficult medical news she'd been hiding from me. It shook me up pretty badly, so I went to talk to my supervisor, who was very supportive. When I returned to my workstation, Carol immediately started grilling me. Where was I? What was I doing? I told her I was talking to our supervisor about something private. She wouldn't let it go, badgering me until I had to firmly ask her to stop because I didn't want to discuss it with her. This sent her into a rage. The next day, she accused me of treating her poorly and demanded to know what my problem was. I told her I had some problems at home and apologized if it was affecting my work. Her response was pure venom. She told me I was full of it, that I was lying to get sympathy because I was so incompetent at my job. And that was it. The war was on. I put down my equipment and walked out of the room. As I left, she taunted me. Why don't you go tell your mommy how I was mean to you? She guessed correctly. I was heading straight for the supervisor's office. My supervisor was furious. He documented the entire incident, wrote her up, and looped in our manager, who was equally unimpressed. As for me, the gloves were off. This woman had to go. My weapon of choice was her own job. We'd recently had a huge computer system upgrade for the role she covered, which should have made her work much faster, but instead of leveraging the new system, she spent her time pointing out its flaws and filling her diary with my supposed errors. I even caught her taking pictures of equipment I'd worked on. I had covered her position a few times, and I knew her tasks didn't take nearly as long as she claimed. On one occasion, I finished what was supposed to be her entire day of work in just 90 minutes. The next time she took a day off, the same thing happened. I cleared her whole workload in under 90 minutes. This discovery was the key. It revealed Carol's greatest fatal flaw, her arrogance. She was so focused on my perceived incompetence that she never imagined I'd see her own. I told my supervisor about my findings. The next time Carol was out, my supervisor brought in 2 people from another department to cover her tasks while I did my own work. One of them posted a time just slightly slower than mine, and the other was actually faster. Now, my supervisor and I were on the same page. She was slacking off, and we both knew it. It was time to spring my trap. Our management team goes absolutely giddy for efficiencies. Any idea that makes work better or faster gets serious consideration. So, I wrote a detailed proposal to break our work area into 2 distinct zones, a returned equipment area and a processing/configuring area. I magnanimously offered to take all the processing and configuring work off her plate, allowing her to focus exclusively on all the returned equipment. On the surface, it looked like I was taking on more responsibility just so we could be more efficient and stop clashing. In reality, I was offloading nearly half of my job onto her in exchange for the very tasks she had been dragging out to look busy. It went better than I could have ever imagined. I gave the proposal to my supervisor, who loved it. She passed it to our manager, who also thought it was excellent. Then, they made the logical next step. They asked Carol for her thoughts, and she flipped her lid. She did it in an email, no less. And I know the details because my supervisor had simply forwarded my proposal to her, and she hit reply all with her response. In that single, rage-fueled click, Carol sealed her own fate. She demanded they trash the idea immediately, calling me lazy, stupid, and not smart enough to do her job. She cited her seniority, accused me of discrimination, and threatened legal action. Management paused briefly, as she was a long-time employee making serious accusations, but my supervisor and manager had a long, documented history of her explosions, and all our stories matched up. For the final blow, when HR called me in to give my side of the story, I pointed out that her log and the pictures she'd been taking amounted to a campaign of harassment that had created a toxic working environment for me. HR transferred her to another department. There, she proceeded to infuriate everyone she worked with, despite being given a workload that was a fraction of what her new colleagues handled. After about 2 months, an email came from HR announcing she was no longer with the company. No fewer than 15 of my coworkers stopped by my desk to congratulate me for being the one to finally outlast her. As a victory party, we completely reorganized our workspace, getting rid of her desk, her chair, and anything else that might have been contaminated by her toxic attitude. It's funny how some people think seniority makes them untouchable. I once heard about a woman in another office who gave her boss an ultimatum: fire my rival, or I'm leaving. She was so sure of her own importance, but the boss just said, "Okay, have your desk cleared out by Friday." Carol made a similar miscalculation. She had been there for almost 20 years, with a maxed-out salary, 5 weeks of vacation, a great retirement plan, all of it. Now, she can't even use the company as a reference because she left on such terrible terms. I found myself thinking that with a 15-plus-year gap on her resume, finding a new job would be tough, but as someone else pointed out, staying at the same job for that long isn't a resume gap, it's a career. Still, a career that ended in such a spectacular flameout is a tough thing to explain in an interview. In the end, this story shows that tangible results and strategic thinking will almost always triumph over petty bullying and manufactured drama. By focusing on provable facts and company values, you can empower yourself even when you feel powerless. So, let me ask you, have you ever had to deal with a coworker who seemed determined to make your life miserable? How did you handle it?